from you as well.
Sure. My wife and I, we've been married for 20 years, and I have 3 other children from a previous marriage. And Stephen was, when Stephen was small, everything appeared to be normal. And eventually it was sort of a slow turn in terms of his diagnosis that we did notice. Friends and family were noticing. We were noticing sort of just a change in behavior. And his teachers at school, of course, as well. And we were living in North Jersey at the time, and took him to a couple of doctors, and he was diagnosed initially. He was just having ADHD, and later on a more serious diagnosis of being bipolar, and of course that was a mixed diagnosis. And through a series of, I guess, tests and doctors and so on, we were treating him, or the doctors were treating him as best as, of course, as they could. And then moving down here to South Jersey, a new doctor, a new situation, and then the diagnosis of being autistic and Asperger's specifically. And then, of course, our relationship with Dr. Eric here, which has been fantastic.
Well, I'd like to also move into some of the stories that you remember, the times where you felt that you weren't quite sure where you were going to turn next. The times that were the most trial, the tribulations that you might have experienced. And we'll talk about all the good stuff in a little while, but getting into that, the meat of where things were at the lowest. Does anybody want to start with that one?
I think going into kindergarten into grade school. Okay. It's like, what am I going to do? I was at a terrific program with SPIN. Didn't know where to turn. And my local state representative, Dennis O'Brien, who's a big strength is in special needs, especially in autism.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I know Dennis and his family very well, so I went to him, and they suggested that I get myself marched up and get on the waiting list for the Philadelphia Academy Charter School. And once I got to that school, things just took off, and it was the best move I ever made.
Wow. Excellent.
We just right at the very beginning, suddenly we're like, we have this diagnosis, now what do we do? And people said, well, you got to apply for medical assistance because that'll help. But then how do you go through that? And you find that there's so much red tape. And here we had 2 parents, college educated, having a hard time figuring our way through the system. And the question that kept coming back to my mind was, how does a single mom who never graduated from high school do this for any disability, let alone for autism? And just for us to get medical assistance so he would be able to be funded for the programming that he needed was a challenge. We started attending a special needs support group, and it was hard because the bigger kids, you know, we had the big kids and we had Eli. I mean, it was always a juggle. And then we started having more and more visitors in our home. We had before, for about the 3 years or 4 years before Eli was actually probably about 5 years before he was finally put in residential, we had 40 hours a week outside of school TSS, or Therapeutic Support Service, in our home, which meant that our home was a public place because we had people coming in all the time. And, you know, I would, on a weekend when somebody couldn't make it, you know, I would hear my kids saying, when is so-and-so going to get here? I'm tired of being with Eli. And, you know, it's like, Eli just did this. And, you know, we had baby gates in the house, and they only slowed him down because he could figure out the gates more easily than we could. One of, I guess, the most...
Houdini.
He was Baby Houdini. We used to call him Baby Houdini all the time. I guess probably the worst thing that ever happened that I didn't even know happened, because I thought he was in the backyard, and he pushed something up against the fence and climbed over a fence, went through a neighbor's backyard, crossed a street, entered an open garage where somebody had a swimming pool set up. And I didn't even know he'd escaped till my neighbor brought him back dripping wet. And he had run across there. The teenager in the house heard a splash went in and saw Eli floating in, 3 feet of water, and of course fished him out and knew exactly where he belonged. And how many times can you beat yourself up for losing sight of a child? In most normal kids, you don't have to keep sight on them 24/7. Eli, even now in the group home, they have to do a visual sighting of him even when he's sleeping every 10 to 15 minutes. They have to keep him in visual sight all day, every day. The last event that finally got CBH approving group home, we'd been in skipping ahead, was again Eli escaping out of the yard. He got out the front gate. I thought he'd gone in the house. He disappeared. He was nowhere to be found. He had a 10-year-old, fast, blonde-haired little kid running around the neighborhood. And what happened, me and the kids, we started running around. Somebody in a car said, there's a little blonde-haired kid 3 blocks away. And my daughter, she took off, and she got Eli, and Eric got on the phone with CBH and said, you almost had an autistic kid. He needs residential. And 2 months later, he was placed. But, it's so scary when you can't find them.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't have an awareness of danger.
Thinks it's a
Many
game.
times.
And they're very quick. And they're runners. That's a
Oftentimes
characteristic of them. They are runners.
Many times, absolutely. I also wanted to, at some point, I also wanted to get into the role of being a father, especially in a community that is, how should I put it delicately? Usually, the person that is kind of running the therapy at home, the ins and outs, tends to be moms, especially in autistic families where finances can be very difficult. You have a need for somebody to be there all the time, and with fathers traditionally taking the role of the breadwinner. Where has your experience been in trying to maintain that role, yet at the same time be a strong, positive presence in your son's lives? I don't know, is that one you want to tackle, Bob?
Yeah, and I feel a lot of those frustrations myself, because you're right. As a dad, I feel it's my responsibility to be the breadwinner and to, although my wife Jackie works and is very successful, but still, I think it's up to me to make sure that we have the finances to give Stephen the kind of services and doctors and whatever it is that Stephen needs to achieve his potential. And there are times when you have to work very hard, very long, and very late hours in order to move your own career ahead. And then coming home and trying to catch up on what's happened with my son and pitch in there as well, and understand all the things that Jackie has gone through during the day and school and so on, and then help support both her and Stephen. So it does.
It's very precarious juggling.
It is, yeah. And you need a little bit of downtime late at night.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
Wow, the fathers so far have quite done a terrific job of sharing.
Absolutely.
Now, the fathers, each of you have outlined the trials and the tribulations of autism and how you brought it up, Eric, how you perceive your roles as being a father with a child with ASD. Now, when we return, the fathers will continue to share their challenges.